Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I'm your host, and today we are jumping right into a brand new deep dive.
And I am your resident theologian, so glad to be here with you all today.
Yeah, we have some really fascinating source material to look at. We are heading into the ancient border city of Jericho.
Right.
Specifically looking at the Gospel of Luke, chapters 18 and 19. And our mission today is to look at the accounts of the blind beggar and Zacchaeus, not as, like, isolated Sunday school stories.
Yeah, the ones you heard when you were a kid.
Right. But to see them as this linked theological masterpiece.
And it really is a masterpiece because it addresses a very real human problem.
Right.
The sources point us back to the wisdom of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 1, which gives this stark diagnostic of human history.
Yeah, the text says, I saw all the oppressions that are practiced under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them.
Spot on.
And it says, on the side of their oppressors there was strength, and there was no one to comfort them.
So what we are looking at there is a dual tragedy. On one side, you have the helpless victim of systemic cruelty, completely without solace.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have the wicked agent of that cruelty, the oppressor.
Who was also trapped, right?
Yes. Trapped in the isolating prison of his own corrupt authority, also lacking true comfort.
And human philosophies always seem to stumble over this dual reality.
They really do. Secular ideologies often sentimentalize the marginalized while seeking to, well, totally eradicate the oppressor.
Or they do the reverse. They coddle the affluent and influential while ignoring the cries of the afflicted.
Precisely. But the text shows us the Lord Jesus Christ approaching Jericho on his ascent to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And he encounters both extremes of this human tragedy on the exact same road, bypassing human logic entirely.
I love that framing, the dual tragedy. It sets up the whole scene so well.
It really does.
But to get the sheer shock of what happens in Jericho, we kind of have to rewind just a bit to the immediate literary context in Luke 18.
Right, because these rescues don't happen in a vacuum.
No, they don't. Right before getting to the city, Jesus has this intense encounter with a wealthy, highly moral aristocrat.
A man who claims he has kept the law from his youth.
Yeah, he has this impeccable resume. He is a pillar of his community. But Jesus tells him to sell his possessions, give to the poor, and follow him.
And the man just walks away sorrowful.
Because he can't part with his massive wealth.
Yeah.
His money is, well, is actual God.
The cultural context here is vital for you, the listener, to grasp.
Oh, absolutely.
In the first century Jewish mindset, massive wealth was often viewed as tangible evidence of divine favor.
Like, if you were wealthy, God was obviously blessing you because you were righteous.
Yes. So when this upstanding, financially blessed aristocrat walks away, Jesus follows it up with a staggering declaration.
Right, the camel and the needle.
Yeah. He tells the audience that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for an affluent person to enter the kingdom.
And people have tried to, like, soften that statement over the centuries, haven't they?
Oh, constantly. You will hear that popular myth about a small gate in Jerusalem called the Eye of the Needle.
Where a camel supposedly had to squeeze through on its knees.
Right, but the sources are clear on this. That gate did not exist.
It's totally made up.
It is a myth invented hundreds of years later to make the text less intimidating. Jesus was using a common Jewish idiom for absolute impossibility.
Taking the largest animal natives to the region.
And the smallest hole a human hand interacts with.
And stating that a wealthy person saving himself is a physical and spiritual impossibility.
Precisely.
I am so glad you brought up that gate myth, because the absolute impossibility of the standard is the whole point.
It is.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the disciples listening to this. They are stunned.
They ask the most logical question, who then can be saved?
Think about it like trying out for an elite sports team.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If the most athletic, hardworking, genetically gifted player gets cut in the first 5 minutes.
Right, what hope does anyone else have?
Yeah. If the most respectable, morally upright, law-abiding aristocrat can't make the cut, the standard is unattainable.
And Jesus confirms their worst fear, but then offers the highest hope.
He gives the definitive answer.
He says, the things which are impossible with men are possible with God.
And that single sentence sets the theological stage for everything that is about to happen in Jericho.
Yes. The sources highlight that the encounters with the blind beggar and Zacchaeus are the living vindication of that promise.
They're the demonstrations of God accomplishing what human effort cannot.
Where the affluent aristocrat failed because of his self-righteousness, the two men in Jericho will succeed.
But not because they try harder.
No, they succeed because divine grace invades their circumstances. This introduces the core concept of monergistic salvation.
Let's define that for the listener, because monergistic is a heavy theological word.
It is, but it's crucial.
Think of it like a lifeguard rescue. If a drowning swimmer is thrashing around and the lifeguard tosses them afloat, they work together.
Which is synergism, two energies cooperating.
Right. But monergism means one work.
One energy.
It's the scenario where the swimmer is completely unconscious at the bottom of the pool. The lifeguard dives in, pulls them out, and does 100% of the saving.
The person being saved contributed nothing but their own need for rescue?
Yeah, the text sets us up to see that salvation is entirely the work of God from beginning to end.
That is a highly accurate illustration. And having established that, the text takes us to the absolute lowest rung of society.
To see this monergistic grace in action.
We arrive at the outskirts of Jericho. And we need to talk about the cultural reality of Jericho to understand the beggar's situation.
Jericho was a booming trade hub, right?
Yes, the city of palm trees. It had incredibly lucrative balsam plantations.
Which produced perfumes and medicinal ointments for the Roman Empire.
Very expensive stuff. Herod the Great even built a lavish winter palace there. It was a place of extreme civic pride and wealth.
And right in the middle of all this economic activity, sitting in the dust by the road, is a man who is entirely marginalized.
Physically disabled and socially discarded.
Because he is blind, he can't participate in the local economy. He is completely dependent on public pity.
But here's the cruel irony. While he relies on the coins tossed his way, he is viewed with private contempt.
By the very people tossing the coins.
Because in that culture, physical ailments like blindness were frequently assumed to be a punishment from God for a hidden sin.
Wow. So he isn't just poor, he is viewed as spiritually cursed.
Yes, and he sits there, hearing the massive commotion of a Passover crowd.
He asks what is happening, and they tell him Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. So he starts to shout.
And the reaction to his shouting from the leading members of the crowd is incredibly revealing.
They tell him to be quiet.
But in the original Greek, they don't just ask politely. The sources point to the specific Greek word sishpa.
Oh, interesting.
The tense used here is aggressive. It is the equivalent of turning around and screaming, "Shut your mouth right now."
That is so harsh. A severe demand for absolute silence.
The psychology here is fascinating. They are participating in a celebratory religious parade.
Escorting a famous rabbi.
And they absolutely hate the inconvenience of true suffering interrupting their procession.
That is such a piercing indictment of human nature. They are perfectly willing to participate in public piety.
They love the aesthetic of religion.
Yeah, the singing, the nationalistic pride, but they harbor sheer contempt for the marginalized when it ruins the mood.
They want the look of holiness without the messy reality of actual compassion.
But the detail that stopped me while reading the notes was that the beggar completely ignores them.
He cries out all the more.
Yes. And look at the contrast in how he addresses Jesus compared to the crowd.
Right. The crowd says, "Jesus of Nazareth."
Which is just a geographic fact. It's accurate but superficial, like saying, the guy from Chicago is here.
Precisely. But the beggar cries out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me."
That is a massive covenantal title.
Very rare in the Gospel of Luke. By using it, he is publicly declaring that this man is the fulfiller of the Davidic covenant.
The promised king.
The beggar, who has no physical sight, is the only one in the crowd who possesses true spiritual sight.
That is incredible. So Jesus stops the procession. He commands the man to be brought to him.
And then something happens that sounds almost redundant.
I was going to say, it sounds almost insulting. The all-knowing creator asks a blind beggar, "What do you want me to do for you?"
It seems obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like, what is he actually doing there? The guy is obviously blind.
The sources explain that Jesus is not asking for information. He is administering an examination of faith.
Okay.
This question forces the beggar to publicly articulate the specific nature of his trust in front of the crowd that just told him to shut up.
He has to vocalize it.
He must decide if he wants a momentary alleviation of poverty, like a larger coin, or a life-altering gift.
By answering, "Lord, let me recover my sight," he is asking to move from the comfort of beggary to the rigorous responsibilities of a healed life.
Yes, to become a participant in society again.
And Jesus grants it instantly. "Recover your sight. Your faith has made you well."
But the Greek word for "made you well" or "saved" is soju.
which encompasses both the physical healing and the spiritual rescue.
His physical eyes are open, but more critically, his soul is regenerated.
And you see the immediate fruit of that. He doesn't go back to his spot or start a business.
He instantly follows Christ, glorifying God. He joins the procession.
That perfectly sets up the second half of the Jericho narrative.
We just saw grace reach into the margins to rescue a helpless victim.
The Ecclesiastes problem of the oppressed having no comfort is solved for this man.
And now, Jesus enters the city limits, and the story shifts to the opposite extreme.
We meet the oppressor, Zacchaeus.
The burning question is, will the same grace apply to the man causing the systemic oppression?
We really need to unpack who Zacchaeus is. Calling him a tax collector doesn't capture the villainy.
Not at all.
Today, a tax collector is just a boring government bureaucrat. But Zacchaeus is described with the Greek title architeulos.
He isn't sitting in a small toll booth. He is a regional tax commissioner,
running a vast network of extortion for Rome.
To understand the visceral hatred for him, look at the Roman tax farming system.
How did that actually work?
Rome didn't want to send its own officials to collect taxes everywhere. Too dangerous.
So they outsourced it.
Right. They would tell a city like Jericho, you owe the empire 10 million denarii. Then they auctioned the right to collect it to a local bidder.
And Zacchaeus, being wealthy, bids on the contract.
He pays Rome up front, or guarantees it. In exchange, Rome gives him the legal authority, backed by military force, to extract that money.
And the catch is, Rome didn't care how much extra he collected.
Precisely. If he squeezed 15 million out of Jericho, he kept the 5 million in pure profit.
A legalized mafia racket. He's bleeding his own neighbors dry to build a personal empire.
Getting wealthy off the tears of the oppressed from Ecclesiastes.
That is why the Jewish populace viewed him as the ultimate traitor.
He was a covenant breaker. He sold his soul to pagan Rome.
The historical data in the sources shows rabbinic literature classified tax collectors alongside murderers and thieves.
Very strict religious laws. Their money was considered ritually unclean.
If he entered a house, the house became unclean.
Their testimony was legally inadmissible in court because they were presumed liars.
Lying to a tax collector to hide your assets was actually a patriotic duty.
So Zacchaeus had immense authority, but he was completely isolated.
He bore the burning hatred of his entire community.
Which brings us back to that incredible image of him wanting to see Jesus.
He is short, the crowd is huge, so he runs ahead and climbs a tree.
And the research from Kenneth E. Bailey provides amazing cultural translation here.
Yeah, the ancient Middle East operated heavily on an honor-shame paradigm.
Public dignity was everything. For a man of his status, running in public was a severe loss of face.
Men of wealth wore those long, flowing robes to the ground.
To run, he had to hike up his tunic, expose his legs, and sprint down a dirt road.
It signaled panic and a total lack of self-control.
Shameful for an elder. And then climbing a tree. That was strictly for young boys.
A wealthy official climbing a tree is absolute humiliation.
It is.
Imagine a corrupt billionaire executive who just foreclosed on half the town.
Right.
Hiking up a tailored suit, sprinting down Main Street, and hiding in a dumpster just to watch a parade anonymously.
Social suicide. He strips himself of every shred of dignity just to catch a glimpse of this rabbi.
And the detail about the specific tree he climbs is brilliant.
The sycamore fig tree. The sources reference a historical zoning law from the Mishnah.
From the tractate Baba Batra 2.7.
Yes. This law forbade large, spreading trees like sycamores from being planted within 25 to 50 cubits of town boundary.
To preserve the aesthetic beauty of the city's approach.
Which means Zacchaeus wasn't in the town square. To find a sycamore, he had to run completely outside the city limits.
He was hiding out in the suburbs.
Out in the agricultural zone, hiding in the dense foliage.
Desperate to remain unseen. And it makes sense. It's Passover season.
The crowd is filled with nationalistic fervor. They hope Jesus is a political revolutionary.
If they spot the chief Roman collaborator standing on the sidewalk, it gets violent.
He is shielding himself from physical danger and humiliation.
And his physical location mirrors his spiritual state, doesn't it?
Alienated, outside the community boundary, hiding in the leaves. A direct echo of Adam hiding from God in Genesis.
Wow. And this brings us to the literary structure of how Luke writes this.
The narrative is constructed as a near-perfect chiasm.
Let's break down what a chiasm is for the listener.
Go ahead.
Before printing presses, ancient writers used symmetry to help people memorize stories, like a mirror or a funnel pointing to the middle.
Right. The first point mirrors the last point and so on.
Until you get to the dead center. And whatever is in the absolute center is the main point the author wants you to focus on.
A literary spotlight. And this story has 9 carefully balanced cameo scenes.
Jesus entering Jericho mirrors his final word of saving grace.
Zacchaeus identified mirrors his wealth being redistributed.
The crowd blocking him mirrors the crowd murmuring against him.
His climb up the tree mirrors his climb down.
But the climax sits perfectly in the center. Jesus stops under the sycamore tree, looks up, calls him by his personal name, and initiates the rescue.
That moment is the theological core of the entire deep dive.
It points directly to the sheer sovereign nature of God's action.
Think about the contrast with the blind beggar.
The beggar was shouting at the top of his lungs.
Zacchaeus utters absolutely no cry for help. He is trying to stay invisible.
Hiding from God, yet God initiates the rescue entirely on his own.
The king stops, looks up, and issues an irresistible command.
It is God acting unilaterally to save a sinner who is totally incapable of saving himself.
Furthermore, Jesus does not make a polite suggestion.
He doesn't say, hey, if you have time later, let's grab lunch.
No. He says, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house.
The language carries massive theological weight.
The Greek verb used is dei, which translates to it is necessary or I must.
The language of divine necessity, driven by the eternal decree of God.
Jesus is saying the redemptive mission of the Messiah requires this specific encounter with this specific sinner today.
Fulfilling the Father's sovereign will, and by declaring that necessity, Jesus forces a collision with the cultural expectations.
By inviting himself to the home of the chief tax collector, he rejects the anticipated hospitality of the city's leaders.
Usually, the mayor and chief priests would host a massive banquet for a prominent rabbi.
But Jesus bypasses all the respectable people and demands hospitality from the most corrupt, unclean traitor in the province.
And the reaction from the community is fierce. They all grumbled or murmured.
All that stored-up hostility they harbored toward their financial abuser is redirected at Jesus.
They complain he is going to be a guest with a notorious sinner, but I want to pause and dig into the mechanics of that.
Of him being a guest.
Yeah. Looking through a modern lens, we might think Jesus is just showing social solidarity.
Like a politician eating at a diner.
Right. Is he just making a social statement about inclusivity, or is something heavier happening legally and theologically?
The sources provide a staggering answer through the specific Greek verb the crowd uses when they complain.
The word katalesai.
Yes, it means to unloose the burdens of a journey or find guest lodging.
But it carries a deeper cultural connotation of intimate table fellowship.
To eat at a man's table was to declare peace and mutual acceptance with him.
So by entering this level of association, Jesus is voluntarily stepping into ritual defilement under rabbinic law.
Absorbing the full weight of the town's social and ceremonial contamination.
He is legally taking the outcast's status upon himself in the eyes of the public.
This is not mere social solidarity. It is a historic, living preview of penal substitution.
Penal substitution being the theological reality where Christ takes the penalty of the sinner upon himself.
Think about the physical mechanics. The crowd wants to tear Zacchaeus apart.
And Jesus steps between the condemning crowd and the guilty sinner.
He shields Zacchaeus from the wrath of the community and takes their public reproach upon his own unspotted character.
The spotless lamb becomes ceremonially unclean, so the unclean extortioner can be made pure.
It is a direct rehearsal for the cross.
Bearing the shame under the sycamore tree as a precursor to bearing the curse on the wood of the cross at Calvary.
Taking the hostility that belonged to the oppressor so the oppressor can go free.
But this naturally leads to a massive practical tension for the listener.
The issue of justice.
Yeah. If Jesus accepts Zacchaeus just as he is, with his pockets full of extorted money, what happens to the justice the town deserves?
Does grace just wipe the slate clean retroactively?
And let him keep his stolen wealth?
Bah.
Does grace ignore the tears of the oppressed?
The narrative answers that tension forcefully. Having received unmerited grace, Zacchaeus does not remain unchanged.
Grace is free, but it is never safe for our idols.
He stands up at his banquet table and voluntarily pledges a radical liquidation of his assets.
He declares he will give half his goods to the poor, and if he defrauded anyone, restore it fourfold.
The math on that restitution is staggering.
Giving away half your gross net worth immediately leaves you with 50%.
Then, out of the remaining 50%, paying back at a 4-to-1 ratio.
The sources point out this fourfold restitution matches the absolute maximum civil penalty in the Old Testament law.
Specifically, Exodus 22, verse 1, for the deliberate theft and slaughter of a sheep.
He doesn't apply the minimum 20% penalty for accidental loss.
He applies the most punitive legal standard to himself,
Executing this math almost certainly guarantees his own financial ruin.
tearing down the idol of wealth that defined his existence.
But the sequence of these events is absolutely vital.
The timing of Jesus' response.
Yes, Jesus declares, "Today salvation has come to this house," before a single coin is actually handed over.
That sequence is everything.
He hasn't written a single check or finalized a refund. He only made the pledge.
Yet his salvation is declared as a present, accomplished, forensic reality.
Justified while still standing at the table, solely based on sovereign grace.
That sequence provides a definitive refutation of two major theological errors.
Legalism and antinomianism.
Legalism argues that we must perform righteous deeds or offer restitution to earn justification.
If that were true, Jesus would have said, "Once the check's clear, then I will grant salvation."
And antinomianism argues that since we are saved by grace, the law doesn't matter and our subsequent actions are irrelevant.
If that were true, Zacchaeus would have kept his money, and Jesus would have told the crowd to be more tolerant of white-collar crime.
The interaction in that dining room destroys both errors.
The promised restitution is not the root cause of his justification.
It is the visible, undeniable fruit of his regenerated heart.
Good works, wild generosity, and a passion for economic justice are the inevitable outcome of true faith.
The sovereign grace of God shatters his covetousness, proving that forensic justification immediately yields a reformed life.
Christ accepted him freely while he was still a sinner, and that acceptance produced a radical voluntary change.
The oppressor became a benefactor.
So, having covered the historical and theological mechanics, we turn to how the sources apply these events to modern ideologies.
The author draws some very sharp lines connecting Jericho to contemporary culture.
And as we move into the modern day, I want to clearly state to you, the listener, that the author takes some pretty sharp swings.
We are going to impartially report the author's arguments to convey the ideas in the text.
Yeah, without taking a side. The first major critique presented addresses seeker-sensitive pragmatism and church growth marketing.
The author argues that contemporary churches frequently rely on corporate marketing schemes to appeal to wealthy, secularly minded individuals,
Trying to make the message non-offensive and culturally appealing.
tailored to the consumer preferences of the target demographic.
But the author contrasts this directly with Christ's actions in Jericho.
Jesus did not use marketing. He didn't alter his behavior to please the demographic majority.
He deliberately offended the majority of respectable citizens.
By ignoring their civic expectations and inviting himself to the home of the most socially toxic man in town.
The text argues Christ relied entirely on the authority of the effectual call,
The sovereign application of grace by the Holy Spirit.
rather than human persuasion or pragmatic gimmicks.
The second modern application the author brings up is a direct refutation of the prosperity gospel.
Prosperity theology argues that divine favor results in physical wealth.
The better your faith, the bigger your bank account.
But looking at Zacchaeus, salvation didn't result in gaining more wealth.
It resulted in the joyful, voluntary liquidation of his financial empire.
The grace of Christ smashed the idol of gold.
The author argues this proves true spiritual blessing frees a person from the tyranny of riches.
The wealthiest man in town met Jesus and immediately became poor by earthly standards, yet was overflowing with joy.
The third critique addresses modern secular social justice frameworks.
Specifically pointing to ideologies like critical race theory.
The author outlines how secular frameworks view the world primarily through intersecting group identities.
Dividing humanity into permanent classes of oppressors and oppressed.
And these secular models, the text argues, demand systemic state-enforced redistribution to achieve equity.
But the author contends Christ subverts this secular philosophy entirely.
He treats both the blind beggar and the tax collector not as avatars of their social class, but as individual humans.
Equally trapped in the desperate condition of total depravity.
So the argument is that true justice and economic reconciliation are not achieved through forced secular systems.
Or government mandates, but through the regenerating work of the Holy Spirit.
When the oppressor's heart is regenerated, as we saw with Zacchaeus, it leads to voluntary restitution.
The text asserts that true equity between alienated groups comes from a changed heart responding to the costly love of the Savior.
Synthesizing all of the historical and theological data we have covered, we return to the dilemma of Ecclesiastes.
We see that Christ provides what human strength simply cannot achieve.
He brings true comfort to the helpless beggar, by giving him both physical and spiritual sight.
Rescuing him from the dust of the roadside and bringing him into the kingdom.
And he brings true comfort to the wealthy oppressor by shattering his idol of covetousness.
Rescuing him from the prison of his own extortion.
On a single dirt road, sovereign grace conquered the absolute bottom and the absolute top of Jericho's social ladder.
And we absolutely must recognize the shadow of the cross hanging over both of these rescues.
These events are fueled by the imminent reality of Jerusalem. Jesus is on his final ascent.
He could only declare that salvation had come to Zacchaeus' house because he was days away from securing that salvation on a different tree at Calvary.
He bears the reproach of the murmuring crowd in Jericho as a sketch of bearing the unmitigated wrath of God outside Jerusalem.
The sovereign mercy displayed to both men is purchased by the blood that will be shed on the cross.
It is an incredibly beautiful picture of substitution.
The king doing for his people what they could never do for themselves.
In the end, that is the core of the text.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked extensively about the crowd trying to silence the blind man.
Yelling over the highly religious, respectable people to be heard.
Look at your own life. What if the loudest crowd trying to silence your cry for mercy isn't secular culture at all?
That is a piercing question.
What if the harshest critics aren't out in the world, but are the respectable, self-righteous voices inside your own head?
Telling you that your past is too messy.
That your need is simply too shameful for the Savior to bother with. The beggar ignored the crowd, and he got the king.
A phenomenal truth to close on.
Do not let the internal crowd keep you from crying out. Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking for this deep dive into the sources. Keep seeking the truth.